Thank you for downloading this RealAgriculture podcast. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca.
Shaun Haney here with RealAgriculture.com, and let's talk some markets here on RealAg Markets. We're joined right now by the lead analyst with Grainfox. It is Neil Townsend. Neil, how's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
Well, we may be well. The markets are not. Neil, I guess the only way to put this is, what the heck is going on? The charts are nasty. They're ugly. There has been more red on the screen as of late than green. What is creating this big slide downwards?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would immediately identify demand as the culprit and say, like, there's been some weak demand. I would beg to differ. I mean, I think if you look at the overall sort of demand that's in the globe, it's on pace. I mean, wheat export demand should be up a little bit this year. Corn demand is up a little bit this year, and soybeans are sort of, relatively flat. But I mean, and I'm talking overall global demand. So I don't think it's demand. I think what's happened is just that, farmers grew big crops in a lot of different jurisdictions around the world. Supplies are probably heavier than what the USDA was estimating for carry-in for this year. And I just think there's lots of competition, and the competition is driving the price down. And, we've got willing sellers, and, buyers know this and are playing a little bit hard to get. I mean, there are some problems with finances and stuff like that, but overall, I think it's just a case of there being, more sellers than buyers at the moment in terms of, the willingness of people to sell, and the buyers are kind of picking that off.
Are we, at what point are we not oversold here? Where where we can expect a little bit of a, maybe not a long-term sustained bounce, but some sort of a rally here, because we have gone so far so fast.
Well, I mean, again, looking at the futures positions of the non-commercials, I mean, they are sort of like at multi-year lows, or in some cases almost at record positions on the short side. And you could say to yourself, well, that once the boat starts to tip the other direction, everybody will run on that side and we'll flip it over into sort of a bull market or something like that. I mean, I don't necessarily see it like that, because, I mean, first of all, everything is true until it's not true. So, the fact that they're short doesn't mean that they can't go more short, and that's what they've been doing. I mean, they probably need at this point something real and something tangible. Some people have said that, maybe when interest rates start to get cut, that will help. But that's sort of a non-supply and demand balance sheet thing. That's an outside factor. I mean, that might happen. But on the sort of, if you were looking at fundamentals as a driver of the futures, I mean, you would kind of look forward and say, well, where are there going to be like narrowing ending stocks, tight ending stocks? What would kind of give them an indication that there's sort of like a tighter supply, so that, they should be, looking at getting, on the other side and going long. And I don't see that for the remainder of 23, 24 necessarily, unless we start to have a big sort of perception that we're going to have, a drought in North America. And there are maps. I mean, there are drought conditions right now in Iowa, a big one centered there, and it seems to be growing. And, Western Canada is very dry. But again, it's February 21st. Very few crops are planted in Iowa or planted in Western Canada at the current moment. So, we can't really say that the crop is drought impacted yet. So we'll have to wait and see. And if the drought persists, yes, that could be something that triggers a bit of a reversal. But if we see situation where, the conditions improve and we get a representative crop or an average crop or even a trend crop, I mean, that's just going to add to the balance sheet. And we're going to have a situation where, 24, 25 might be more oversupplied than 23, 24.
Okay. Well, so we've talked about the bad side of this. Are there positive, like what positives need to come together? You mentioned interest rates. that one's a little like that to me smells of like short-term rally, not anything to sort of form a base here to build from. Is it basically cheering for poor weather conditions again? Because that just feels counter to our profitability on farm, where it's been so dry in certain pockets for so long. We need some moisture. Feels like we got kind of a double-edged sword beating us down here.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what I'll say about sort of like other signals like interest rates or that type of stuff, like I'm not a particular expert in that area. I'm just repeating what somebody said there.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the fundamentals. What happens has to happen on the fundamentals. And what I would say is that, the unfortunate truth is we're probably in need of, having a weather wreck somewhere to kind of really reverse the trend because, production and stocks are building. Now, one of the criticisms maybe people could level to is that the USDA is not capturing the real stock levels that are in Russia or the European Union in particular for wheat. But we've seen South America sort of wobble a bit, but I mean, is a wobble enough to go from sort of 165 million bushels, a million tons of soybeans down to 155 million tons of soybeans, or some people are at 145 million tons of soybeans? Like, that's certainly going to help. But I mean, broadly speaking, there's no real concerns on the feed grain side. There's ample corn. Bigger crops are projected to come from Ukraine, Russia, even the European Union are probably going to have good corn crops at this point. So then you'd have to say, like, is there enough sort of adverse weather going to happen in the U.S. that we could see sort of a cut to the prospect of corn yield? But the problem there is, like, in the USDA Outlook Forum, they estimated, I think, 181 or 181.5. I can't remember the exact number for bushels per acre. Even if they came in at 175, that's a supportive, but not a trend breaking yield. I think it has to be like, 170 or lower. And I think that's very hard to get with, like, unless you have like prolonged, serious drought issues. And a lot of the weather models show that actually the North American drought is due to break and that they're projecting more or less a relatively normal growing season. Now, those models can change, but that's what they're saying. So, yeah, I mean, and then you look at the demand side, and the only comment I'd make on the demand side is that, there's been a lot of poo-pooing about China and China's not there. But, China's demand this year, I mean, could you really ask for more? I mean, they've imported a record amount of wheat, record amount of corn. They've imported large volumes of sorghum. They've imported barley. They've imported, the one thing maybe they're down on is yellow peas, but I mean, everything else is either at or above sort of, record levels. So, I don't think China can offer us more. And maybe the final point I'd make is, like, we should be watching probably the Indian crop for a lot of reasons in Western Canada for pulses and also for wheat, even for canola, a little bit in oil seeds. But, India, I don't know if we ever get a full picture of what happened there, but what I would say about India is that, if they were to have sort of stumble here in the next 6 to 8 weeks with, like, seriously high temperatures that, reduce the yield potential for the wheat, and they actually policy wise say, oh, okay, we're going to import, 5 or 10 million tons of wheat. I mean, that would have an impact on the wheat prices at least. Okay. But that's a what if.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move into strategy here before we wrap up. I've been hearing from a lot of analysts, farmers undersold on 23 crop for sure, even on 24 crop. I was with a group of producers in different times over the past 2-3 weeks, and one of the comments I continue to hear is, what the heck do I do with my unsold 23 crop? Because as I've watched this, not a falling knife, I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but as I've watched this slide lower, I've grown more and more hesitant to sell because it's like, oh man, now I'm stuck. What do you do?
Well, okay, and as always, it depends sort of at what level you're sold at, overall. I mean, I think right now you can't be betting like 50 or 60% to the crop for 23, 24. You got to whittle that down to sort of like, 30% or something. And then the strategy with that last 30%, is basically, okay, we are dry in North America, in Iowa and Western Canada. We don't need to bet on a drought. We just need to bet that there's a perception that there is a risk. And then when those perceptions sort of, get to their, it's hard to pick the exact moment, but as they increase, that's when you should be looking to sell. So, right now we see like corn, or soybeans or wheat, they're kind of almost at their lowest levels of the year. I mean, we had a bit of a bounce yesterday, giving up a bit of that today. But I would say that probably, for that final portion, anywhere from, 15 to 30%, I think you're probably looking to really be active in March and early April if those perceptions continue. And, for new crop, I think it also sort of says, like, a lot of farmers would probably be out there saying like, oh, well, new crop, I mean, the prices are so low now, we should see a rebound in new crop. Actually, there is a risk that 24-25, we see even lower prices, especially if the U.S. corn ending stocks continue to build. I mean, they're estimated at 2.5 billion bushels this year, but if they get the acres planted and they get, the yield to 181 or 175 and above, I mean, corn stocks could build there unless there's a significant export outlet, which there's just too much competition to really guarantee that they're going to export a record volume or a higher volume of corn. So, for 24-25, I also think at the same time that you're looking for the perceptions of drought in Western Canada or in the US sort of mounting, I think that's when you would start to sell some, to increase the amount that you want to sell. And one rebuttal to that would be, well, hey, I'm the person who's dry. How can I possibly sell? But, you got to sell sort of some because, the droughts, as we've seen over the last few years in a lot of jurisdictions, we've seen, oh, it looks like a drought. And then, oh, lo and behold, no drought. And the crop has really fared very well.
Yeah. Well, and, the other thing farmers have been saying to me is, listen, for the last 3 years, the best time, or best strategy has been to just hold, right? Don't sell early, hold, because the market has rallied through the winter months. That has not been the case here this year at all. So we have to adjust our strategy for sure. And just like there's recency bias with the farmer in terms of their marketing strategy, the funds are going to have the same sort of recency bias, because last year we tried to kill the corn crop routinely, like we usually do, but even more so last year. And boy, the yields just blew us away in terms of where they were, considering how much adversity there was. As we do hear rumors of poor conditions through the growing season, we always do. I think we may see some of the funds and the market react with a little less, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
I would agree with that, Shaun. I mean, I think like once bit, twice shy. And again, like I think that, one of the problems right now is that there's just not a lot of love for, the ag space from the non-commercials, right? And, that's a hard trend to dislodge. I'm not smart enough or aware enough to know, but I mean, they say that, somewhere upwards of 94-95% of trading is being done by computers and algorithms right now. And you just think like it's all relative, right? Like, and if they're looking for opportunity and excitement, and the computers are trying to find something out, I mean, unfortunately for the ag space, it's not very exciting right now. And even in the best case scenario, without like sort of a 2012 like corn drought, I mean, what would the repair be to the prices going forward if we get sort of, even like say 2 or 3% below average yields? I mean, it's going to take more than that. And I just, I don't want to be a downer. I'm just saying that, we might get there, but it's going to be, a bunch of different stops along the track to get there. And there's probably not going to be one moment where we see that. Now, some of the hope that we have, or not hope, but some of the thing is like, will there be a bigger impact by biodiesel in 24-25? Will there be more? Like I noticed today, like Boeing was complaining about the lack of availability of renewable aviation fuel. I mean, a lot of these people want to do some greenwashing. They want to get something. The mandates are there. So, the biodiesel era is maybe just in its infancy here. And that could be something just like the ethanol era that kind of, once it started to gain traction, it sort of outpaces the yield adjustments or the acreage gains that they can make now. But, I thought maybe we'd see some of that in the last half of this year. I don't think we really will, but maybe in the second or third quarter of next year, we'll start to see a more defined story about what the growth in biodiesel is going to do.
Great stuff. Hey, Neil, thanks so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. And hopefully next time we chat, we're higher than we are here today. That's all I can say. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you very much.